When your debt snowballs pushing the boulder up the hill and you're looking over your shoulder because creditors have no chill and they're lying to you on social, you're just looking for something real. Get with Brunch and Budget. We'll help you share what other folks will tell you to steal. This is Brunch and Budget, the show about personal finance and racial economic inclusion with your host, Pamela Ballard, a certified financial planner and accredited financial counselor here to help take the bite out of your budget. Brunch and Budget is part of the Race and Wealth Podcast Network. I'm your sound provider, Dialect, and here's your host, Pamela Capella.
Thank you, Dialect, and thank you, everybody, for tuning in today.
Yes, thanks for tuning in. For those of y'all who are watching us on Spondulix, dressed up a little bit because you're supposed to be personal and responsible. Also, because
very personal and responsible.
It's the pandemic, so like in terms of responsibility is like it's only for the top half. I'm still wearing sweatpants on the bottom.
Exactly. It's Zoom responsible.
Zoom responsible. Trying to be responsible. Although my hair was frizzy today, right? And I wanted to leave here because I wanted to talk a little quick moment. Mind if I on my hair high horse? Yeah. On my hair high horse, there have been a lot of discussions lately in the Black community talking about how people with curly hair like mine have dominated the discussions about discrimination in hair. And I think that's a really important thing. Folks who have my complexion and my kind of hair have often talked about that we've experienced bullying or being treated unfairly or discrimination when it comes to our hair. And that's cool and all, and our experiences are real and valid, but centering ourselves takes away from the actual point, and the actual point that this is anti-Blackness. The fact that we get messed with our curly hair is a subsidiary of the discrimination that people with 4C hair face whenever they try to get a job, when they're told that their hair is inappropriate, kids in school. I mean, I used to live in the Caribbean when I was a kid, and it was a little bit different because it was a majority Black place, but we also had that about dreadlocks, about you couldn't get a job, you weren't considered trustworthy, and all those types of things. And it's really important for us to, let's wrap in a second. Yeah. It's really important for us to be able to share our stories and understand that our stories are real and valid. But when I used to get into fistfights about my hair when I was a kid in school, when I didn't live in the VI, when I was in Pennsylvania, they said I had N-word hair. They didn't say anything because I was curly, because I was frizzy. They used words like nappy, which actually didn't apply to my hair because they were angry at my relationship or my adjacency to the Blackness that they fear and that they hate. And I think when we talk about this stuff, and I feel like I know what you're going to bring in, when we talk about these kind of things, we should remember that our stories are real and valid, but also get to the root of things. As we unearth the root, then we can get everybody free of the tree. So what's your thing? You had something you want to bring in?
Well, I mean, Abercrombie and Fitch, they found a loophole around actually banning dreadlocks.
Wait. Abercrombie and Fitch banned dreadlocks?
The way that they were able to hire people who looked a certain way is instead of calling them store clerks or cashiers or anything like that, they called them brand ambassadors. So brand ambassadors, they were allowed to actually specify what they wanted them to look like. And that included the type of hairstyle, the weight.
So brand ambassadors, so like they're influencers, like they're actors, like they're performers. Artists always remember the discrimination that we face and the types of hardships that they give us are a blueprint for what they want to give to every other type of work.
For real.
Because how are they going to give you the restrictions of being a movie star and you ain't even a movie star?
Yeah, and you're getting paid minimum wage at a fucking store at the mall. Like, come on. But they were able to do that. They were able to legally do that.
LFO, can you release a diss track years later? Because now I guess you don't like the grocery shopping in the or you like them, but come on.
Listen. So today we're talking about the myth of personal responsibility. It's not that you're lazy. It's not that they're lying to you, right?
Yeah, and even this thing with, your hair being natural, or your hair being out, or your hair being in a way that conforms to a religion that you may be a part of.
It's your fault your hair is inappropriate and unkempt and long and, whatever else they're saying, right? You just fix your hair and we'll give you the job.
Let's get into this thing about personal responsibility because, on the surface, a lot of these arguments about hair and stuff, it sounds like a plausible thing. It's like, hey, you need to be responsible for yourself. You need to take care of yourself. That's an important thing. But oftentimes it goes too far to the point where we're expected to be the one force saving the world, and we can't actually do that. So we blame ourselves. When I heard only you, I may be dating myself here, but when I heard only you can prevent forest fires, that was a lot of pressure.
I know, you weren't even at the forest that
was like, somebody else can't handle this, like an adult who knows about fire and water stuff?
Because they told kids that stuff. It was like a freaking bear who said, you dialect, little baby-lect, you're the only one.
And the same thing, that same point is the same point that enticed people to join the military to help out their country.
Yep.
We had, politicians have been pushing this on all sides of the political divide. You had your Ronald Reagan who said, if one cannot govern themselves, how can they be expected to govern others? And that's the Republican right-wing thing. So you think that the liberals would be a little bit different. But don't forget, ask not what your country could do for you, ask what you can do for your country. That's everybody's favorite Kennedy.
Yo, listen, personal responsibility.
Maybe not everybody's favorite Kennedy. I mean, shout out to Jamie.
Yeah. There we go. Shout out to Jamie.
What? Malibu's most
I feel that. Well, and if you think about it, and the way that personal responsibility is framed and individualism is framed in this country, it's rooted in capitalism, and capitalism is rooted in extracting labor from you without giving you anything back, right? Because personal responsibility, especially when it comes to finance and when it comes to personal finance, it even says personal finance in the name, is all about you figure it out. You don't make any mistakes. If you make any mistakes, it's your fault. It has nothing to do with the system. The system works perfectly, and you're the reason why you're in this mess.
And there's a little bit of pessimism in it too, because it's like, sometimes they'll say the system is corrupt and the system is bad,
right?
But you can't do anything about it. We often talk about that, like the moves that you can make within these harmful systems.
Right. And then that often gets translated to, if you weren't smart enough, if you didn't know better, if you didn't get the right education, then that's the reason why the racial wealth divide exists,
They'll
right?
say that you're lazy. They've been saying that we're lazy since the beginning of everything. We had it in the advertisements for the show, but I looked up on a whim what a lazy Susan was, because I was like, we're talking about personal responsibility, we talk about laziness and all that, so I just want to see, let me see. And of course, it comes out to predictable results. Susan, according to scholars, was the type of name, it's just a typical name that a commoner would have, someone who would have a job as a servant. And as we all know, servants are described as lazy in every point in history. The reason that there was an excuse to enslave Africans was that they were inherently lazy people. The reason why it was okay to take away things from Native Americans is that they were inherently lazy people who just sit around with nature. The reason why they say that poor people shouldn't get a bigger wage today, they say that fast food workers are lazy, so they shouldn't get it. So Lazy Susan comes from them creating a piece of technology, a little piece of circle, and they're like, oh, look, it gets to replace our lazy servants whose whole job is to serve us day in and day out.
What?
So not only are poor people blamed for being lazy when they're really working hard, but also automation is blamed on poor folks.
The reason why automation exists is because we're all lazy. So you just lose your job, Susan. That's it. It's over. It's over.
That's
my
why
God.
Whitney made that song, My Name Is Not Susan. That's what you say.
Wow. So we talk about the racial wealth divide a lot on this show, and the racial wealth divide has a lot to do with the myth of personal responsibility, because a lot of people say the racial wealth divide exists because there is a lack of personal responsibility in the Black community in particular, right? And so we did some digging, of course, and we found this really amazing report that was done by Duke University on what we get wrong about the racial wealth gap. And the thing that it really highlights are these things that we point to, right? We're like, well, if this happened, this would fix the racial wealth divide. If more Black people went to college, right? If they got more higher education, if they got better jobs, right?
Because that's another stereotype. You know, Black people, and not just Black people, but Black adjacent people, as I was talking about with the hair, and poor people are thought of as stupid.
Right, exactly. So if they were able to get better jobs based on their higher education, if they were able to buy homes, right? Home ownership is the path to closing the racial wealth divide.
Well, because, you know, when they talk about model minorities, it's Asian folks, they get all this education, right? And that's why they have housing, and that's why they have community, right?
That's not why. But that is what they say, right? The other thing is, a lot of people have been saying, especially recently, and I guess for all time, that if you bank Black or you buy Black, that will close the racial wealth divide, right? If the money just stays in the community.
Which is plausible, because we just talked about not last time, but a couple times ago, about the myth of segregation. And how desegregation didn't end up working out for folks. So, so if we try to fix that by buying with Black folks, then that's going to fix things, right?
No, sorry. The other thing is entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is a big thing. Going along with buying black or banking black is, if there were just more black entrepreneurs, that would fix the racial wealth divide, right?
And the thing we want to say is that all of these together are what we find necessary to actually make some change.
Yes, it's not just one thing. And then really, one of the bigger myths is that if black people just save more money, right? If there was a greater emphasis on saving in black households, if there was a greater emphasis on personal responsibility, this report actually called out the phrase because that phrase is often used as a dog whistle against actually passing policies that would promote wealth redistribution. And when I say wealth redistribution, I mean fucking reparations, y'all.
Yeah,
that's what needs to happen.
I'm pulling up mine on social media. I was having a chat because I'm fancy like that with the CEO of NCRC, the National Community Reinvestment Coalition, and was talking about, they just put out a report about there's a 20 to 30% divide between black and white homeownership rates that has persisted for more than 100 years.
Oh, this isn't new.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Well, see, but they put out a new report. But to reach a 60% black homeownership rate within the next 20 years, the number of new black homeowners each year would need to triple. That's what the report has and talks about it. So I engaged with them and I was talking to them about like, hey, that's going to take a lot of policy change, right?
Yeah.
That's not just going to be that. And the cat whose job it is to know about this, and this was a white
CEO,
person, as far as I know in their background, said yes. And reparations. Specifically, that's what's going to happen because we need money to build the place where there's no money. You can't save money if you don't have money.
Yeah, you just can't. Everybody, this is an uphill battle.
Should we stop and go to a song? Is that what's happening?
I mean, I think so.
All right, let's stop and go to a song real quick.
It.
We got a number of songs that this time that we're going to be talking about laziness. And funny enough, I couldn't find, maybe this has to do with the US's hustle culture, there weren't as many artists from the US that talked about it other than by saying, everyone else is lazy but me, I hustle very hard. In other countries, we got stories and songs about this. Well, I'm going to share this cat from Adelaide, Australia, D Real, with the song Lazy Eye. And y'all check that for 3 minutes and change, and we'll be back with you in a moment.
Hard to see through the haze inside. It's taking time for days. No race to make the line, a paper chasing my pace decline. I'm out it like Calvin, I stay reclined, but play bluffs and I'm raising mine, leaving dust on my way behind. I've been accosted a flame of mic. Some people fuss by the way I ride the beat while they playing in a minor league style like a Sega in a cellar of a winery. Man, you bolder than that fella that I might have seen every day by the street begging for a $5, please. Yo, it's deli and we ready for the finer things finally. Usually kept it quiet as a library. Ain't no sign of me, but now you seen the sign of me from my release. Lazy eyes, Mona Lisa, right in peace. Lazy eyes, strain and try hard to see through the haze inside. It's taking time for days. No race to make the line, a paper chasing my pace decline. Yo, lazy eye, strain and try hard to see through the haze inside. It's taking time for days. No race to make the line. Lazy eye. Lazy guy, yo, lazy guy, if you get abrasive, time wasting, vagrant, or as described by his patrons, deprived of elation, tainted arrangement, signs in his eyes you could find information. He's aimless, patient, deranged in a brain sick decay, mind state, stay out of fake business, rake riches, broomstick, break bitches, shape shifting, snake drifting, paint sniffers, claims different, heard he was too polite, super duper nice, when he used the mic his views collide, hanging by himself like suicide, choosing sides so I'm muting up a sewer life, chose to write rhymes by the candlelight yawning, snorting lines from the sands of time, always late when a man arrived, deep real, lazy guy is a way of life, lazy guy, strain and try hard to see through the haze inside, it's taking time for days, no race to make the line, a paper chasing my pace decline, yo, lazy guy, strain and try hard to see through the haze inside, it's taking time for days, no race to make the line, lazy guy, yo, lazy Lazy guys taking playing of the lot, claiming I'm not dropping a tape. Gotta wait till I'm harder to make it. Negotiation, proper arrangements, dollars and payments, offers from famous scholars and masons. Toxic attitude, got a big infectious, asking for a lot like property inspectors. Was to be expected at any second. Daily Records representative, up inside my head a bit. Friend, I could smoke, good for brainstorming. When it's raining all day, you stay torment. That was a problem of many, at any of any would probably swallow a whole bottle of Henny. Have a look, we're intolerant, send me. Need a collar, don't tempt me. I'd go Connor if you wanted to stress me, yeah. Lazy guy, the awakened giant, breaking out this time, they won't take me alive. Lazy guys, strain and try hard to see through the haze inside. It's taking time for days. No race to make the line, a paper chase on my pace decline, yo. Lazy guy, strain and try hard to see through the haze inside. It's taking time for days. No race to make the line. Lazy guy, lazy guy.
Lazy Eye by D Real. You notice how he said lazy eye and said I, like I, lazy eye, and then strain and try. Because an actual lazy eye is when your eye doesn't work, so your other eye has to do more work. So even while talking about laziness, he talks about how much more work he got to do.
Wow. I didn't think about the fact that that's why they call it a lazy eye. It's not it's lazy, it just doesn't work. They can't. It's a disability.
It's a disabled eye.
Yeah, it's a disabled eye, not a lazy eye.
It's everywhere.
Language. It's everywhere, y'all. Wow. And laziness is so villainized, right?
Yeah, one thing, I don't have it up here, but when I was researching this, we looked in Psychology Today to look up the idea of laziness. And they have these really interesting distinctions between laziness, procrastination, and idleness.
Oh.
And that they're actually psychologically very separate things with separate roots and separate ways to get out of them.
Wow.
And laziness is more of a feeling than even a state of being.
Oh, wow. Yeah, right. Like humans can't be lazy. We can feel lazy, right? But yeah, wow, that's so interesting. Okay.
Yeah, that's a whole next show, though.
That's a whole next show.
It's a different show. That's not even our kind of show.
Yeah, no, exactly. No. So I want to go through, in particular, this report and how they break down all of the different reasons that people state for how to close the racial wealth divide, right? Because the thing is that the racial wealth divide was not caused by your own individual, like lack of personal responsibility. It wasn't caused by lack of education, or it wasn't caused by like you not having a good enough job or anything like that. So the first thing I want to dispel and just talk about again and again and really like drive home in is the difference between income and wealth. Mm-hmm. Income is your ability to earn money, and wealth is your ability to accumulate that money, right? So with income, you can earn income, but it could just all have to go out the door for whatever reason. And especially with POC, we know that POC are more likely to have student loan debt. POC are more likely to be sending money back home a generation. POC are less likely to have a history of homeownership in their family. They're less likely to have a safety net in their family. Often they are the safety net in their family. So if you're making more income than your parents ever have, you're probably taking care of more finances and you have more financial obligations than someone else who has wealth in their family. Because the other thing is that wealth begets wealth, right? So when it comes to wealth and when it comes to building wealth, when you're starting from scratch, the road to building wealth is long. It takes a lot of sacrifice, it takes a lot of luck, and it takes a lot of,
Yeah, well, I just wanted to pick up on the words. What's the last word you're going to say? It takes a lot of...
Oh, I forgot already. You just...
Okay. You said sacrifice. Sacrifice really triggered me to a point because this is the thing. People talk a lot about how sacrifice is what's going to get you rich. I know it's not, because that's not what sacrifice means. You know what sacrifice means? It's going to get you killed for the benefit of others.
Damn. Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing too, is when you're the first in line to be building generational wealth, you are sacrificing yourself in a lot of ways, right? And I think that's the reality.
Well, think about the parents, when folks talk about like my parents worked really hard and they had this terrible job that they hated that broke their back and now they're old and retired and they can't even travel, retired and broke me down so that I could get somewhere.
Yeah.
The pressure on kids who don't start out with a lot, and this is across racial barriers, so you can see commonalities in all the colors, like we can't just do whatever.
Yeah.
You can't Zuckerberg it and be like, I'm gonna drop out and start this whole thing
and he
because
celebrated
your parents
for that.
broke their back for you. They sacrificed.
Yo, Zuckerberg is celebrated for dropping out of college. If a black kid drops out of college, what are they, lazy?
Yeah.
Right? See the difference? See the difference? It's all coded language.
I mean, even black kids who are in college right now consider lazy.
So let's talk about college, right? Let's talk about higher education because
those safe spaces where kids get to do whatever they want.
College, that's what it's supposed to be there for, right? Nope.
That's not even what it's supposed to be there for. I mean, that's just what it's called.
Yeah.
Right? It's as we say that education isn't a silver bullet, they still want to undermine the folks who are trying to go through it.
Yeah. So let's talk about higher education. The big myth around education in general is that black families don't emphasize education as much as white or Asian families. What? Black families actually, dollar for dollar, when you control for household type and socioeconomic status, actually tend to be more financially supportive of their child's education than white families.
So what does that mean exactly?
That means that through direct financial support, black families actually place more financial emphasis on education than white families do. They spend more money on education, they spend more time on education, or they spend more resources on education per dollar than the average white family does. That is huge, right? And so that completely right there dispels that myth. So, okay, black families are sending their kids to college. More black women are going to college than ever. More black women are going to college than any other socioeconomic demographic out there. So what does that translate to dollars-wise? Shall we pull up a chart?
Let's pull up some charts. Let's see what we got here.
Yeah, because higher education is supposed to lead to closing the racial wealth divide, right? Because higher education is supposed to lead to those better jobs and more income and higher net worth.
Maybe that's why we're not seeing as many black women in Hollywood and on SNL and all that stuff, because they're busy in college.
They're busy, yeah, they're in college.
They're in college
there you go.
learning. That's what's going on, right?
So,
okay, so what we got here?
Here's the real number. Let's take a look. If you look at the average white family's net worth.
Let's make it bigger. We'll get out.
Yeah. If you look at the average white family's net worth, right? And if you look at the less than high school diploma, that means that this white person did not graduate from high school. Their net worth at $82,968 is more than a black person who graduated with a college degree. Their net worth is $70,219.
So a high school dropout, on average, we're talking about not the mean here, but the median.
Yeah.
They are making $12,000 more than an average black person.
Their net worth is $12,000 higher.
Excuse me. Actually, that's even more important. Their net worth is $12,000 higher than a black person who has graduated.
They have more wealth. Yes. Yeah. And that's due to a lot of factors, right? The biggest factor is student loan debt. So the cost of college education has grown faster than inflation over the last 20, 30 years. Now, inflation 2-3% a year. That means the cost of goods goes up about 2-3%. The cost of college has been going up 5% a year over year. By the time our kid goes to college is going to cost $500,000 to go to.
That's a lot of college.
That's a lot of college, yeah. That's a lot of debt, right? And so if things continue the way they are, because so many black Americans are also saddled with more student loan debt, their net worth can start off at a hugely negative amount when they finish college. But college is supposed to lead to a better job, right?
Right, well, that's the thing.
That's why you did it.
That's the thing where you're taking the hit and it's supposed to be worth it.
Right.
That's the thing about the self-sacrifice part, where it's not just your parents' sacrifice so you could get ahead, which I get that that's the part of it, but then they're saying for you to sacrifice so you can get ahead. And that doesn't always work out, because self-sacrifice means that the person who benefits also the person who gets the hit.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and then we talked about the difference between income and wealth, right?
Right.
And the idea of, okay, well, if I'm making the same amount of money as my white peer, right, then I should have the same ability to accumulate wealth, right? That's the personal responsibility. We're making the same amount of money. I just have to be just as responsible with my money as my white peer. The reality is that POC and Black Americans in particular have more financial obligations than their white peers. They're less, we mentioned at the top of the show, they're less likely to have a history of homeownership, less likely to have wealth in their family that is generational, they're able to tap into in case something goes wrong, right? And for the most part, the starting salaries and the salaries in general, there's an income gap already that exists. So on top of that, it probably took you longer to get to that income level than your white peer. So you have to spend more time gaining that income, and that means less time to actually build that wealth on top of everything else. So a better job doesn't actually lead to more net worth. Let's pull up another chart.
All right, let's get more charts, because it's like, because it still sounds like I can magic blood, son of a Jedi, superhero my way if I just put my nose to the grindstone and worked hard
Right,
enough,
like
right?
if you make the right amount of income, if you do all the right things within that, what does that look like, right? And so this chart shows the median household net worth by race and compared to household income quintile. So
okay, household income quintile, that's just getting fancy.
yeah, so this is basically the 4 different levels of income, or 5 it looks like, basically
Quintile, it's quin.
Oh, 5, yes. Quinn, 5, yes. The 5 different levels of income. And I want to look at the second to the highest one. The second to the highest one is $75,000 to $120,000. And if you look at this chart, you see that for white Americans making between $75,000 to $120,000, their net worth is $200,000. Compared to a Black American making the same exact salary, their net worth is $83,000.
So when they say work twice as hard to get half as much, it wasn't correct. It was more like to get 40% of.
Yeah.
It's not even half as much.
Yeah.
That's messed up because I always thought that, my aunts and uncles and them was exaggerating by saying that.
Nope. They were underselling it, actually.
If anything, they were underselling it. It's so ill when we can get the stats that back up the personal stories that everybody has always told you.
Yeah, and that's what's so powerful about these stats. And I think that people have taken them and warped them into this whole like personal responsibility rhetoric, right? And so when we look at these stats and we break it down where it's like higher education is not closing the racial wealth divide, better jobs are not closing the racial wealth divide. What about home ownership? Is home ownership closing the racial wealth divide, right?
I mean, because home ownership is something that's definitely been kept out of Black people and other people of color's hands for a really long time. Through policy, through all sorts of nefarious tactics, the redlining, the digital redlining, all that.
Well, and it's true. And a lot of Americans, actually, most of their wealth is in their home. And it's usually the biggest asset that you're going to purchase in your lifetime. And so the thing is that Black Americans with positive wealth do actually tend to have more of their assets be within home ownership. But that's not actually a good thing. The reason why is because white Americans who also own homes also have other assets. So Black Americans who own homes don't have the additional bandwidth to actually invest in other assets as well. They put all of their extra resources into actually owning this home. So more of their net worth is based in essentially an illiquid asset, something that it's difficult to tap into. You have to sell to actually make liquid. All of these things when it comes to home ownership, this is another reason why home ownership is not going to close the racial wealth divide, because when Black Americans invest all their money into it, then they don't have the ability to actually put money in other assets. They don't have the extra resources to do it.
So you're saying that Black Americans have a diversity problem?
They do.
Yeah. No,
they
like,
do.
well, it's because this is the thing, like, well, because folks love to talk about diversity of thought and all that, and the diversification of investments is the thing that makes it so that none of the investments hit you as hard. Yeah, that's the whole point of it, right?
Right, exactly.
When we talk about the stock market, it's be invested in 10,000 stocks so that if one company goes out of business, it doesn't really bother you now.
Right. And well, now let's look at if white Americans don't own homes versus Black Americans who don't own homes, right? But what this study found was that white Americans who didn't own homes still had 31 times more wealth than the average Black American who didn't own a home. So here's the thing. If you look at it, the numbers show that the average white family who owns a home, their net worth is $239,000. The average Black family owns a home, their net worth is $99,000.
Which is, again, consistent with what we were talking about. What's interesting is that it's much closer than the non-homeowners. I mean, it's still a huge gulf. But this is what we say about, like, when people are saying that, these things will help change, because they are good things.
They do.
And they can improve.
Yeah, they do help close the divide a little bit, but not just, homeownership is not just the answer. Because if you look at non-homeownership, the average wealth of a Black family is $120 if you don't own a home. And the average wealth of a white family is $3,700. And that really tells you that when Black families own homes, that is where most of their assets are.
Yeah.
Right?
You know, by the way, we've mentioned this before, but when someone's checking us out for the first time, like, well, hey, you're talking about the Black families and the white families. What about Latino or Latinx families? What about Asian families? You're Asian. You have some thoughts about that.
Families,
like, you have family. Families? How many families do you have? Okay. You got family. So what's the deal with that? And first of all, we wanted to mention that we often talk about things from the Black-white paradigm, because that's the blueprint for how oppression is done throughout this country with everybody. And also, specifically specifically, when we talk about Asian people, not only is it underreported, but folks also skew along color lines.
Yeah, they really do. The thing about Asian Americans as a monolith is it tells the wrong story, right? It's not correct because Asian Americans also have colorism, and within that colorism, they also have a very stratified economic divide just within Asians.
Right. Well, and then we're talking about different countries then having also different economic situations. So it's hard to group all of those things together. It makes it so it's really messy whenever you start trying to put these things to statistics.
And it's the similar thing with the Latinx community, right? It's a very similar thing of like when you look at these groups as just these like broad groups, it's really hard to actually like dig in. And so I think when we understand the black-white paradigm, like Dialect was talking about, we start to understand the things that we can do to actually push policy forward that will actually benefit all of us.
Yeah, because I mean, policy, again, is one of the things that got us here.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of home ownership and policy, you know we talk about this on the show all the time, but let's talk about redlining, right? And let's talk about government-sanctioned redlining. The government invented redlining.
The FHA.
The Federal Housing Administration in the 1930s, during the New Deal, they basically were subsidizing white home ownership. And the way they did that was they said, hey, mortgage lenders, we are only going to back this mortgage if you lend this money to a white family who's going to be in this neighborhood. They literally boxed out black families completely.
I mean, mind you, they, I don't know if they actually boxed them out because basketball wasn't invented like that. But they didn't say white families only. They said Americans only. And that's the thing. Whenever you hear people talk about Americans, hardworking Americans, middle-class Americans, real Americans, they're often talking about white Americans, hoping that you'll not notice what they're saying because of the discrimination that ends up happening.
Right. And I mean, let's talk about today, right? Because that discrimination is real. When a lot of black neighborhoods, their home values are depreciated because of racism as well. So there's this article that came out in the Griot, and it came out literally 2 weeks ago, February 15th, 2021. This black couple got an appraisal done for their home. They were planning to sell it, so they put $400,000 in renovations into the home.
A lot of renovations.
That's a lot of renovations. That's like the whole fucking house. And so they came back, and the appraiser came back, and the appraisal came back for only $100,000 more than what they originally got appraised for when they bought it.
You know, personal responsibility would tell you that they did the wrong type of renovations and they actually failed. You take a risk when you do things, and sometimes the risk doesn't work out, right? That's what happened, right?
400, how they did all the renovations.
Yeah, no, they messed up, right? They put all the, like, they made the floor out of thumbtacks or something. Right? That must be what happened if personal responsibility is.
They built a sinkhole. Like, what the hell could you have done, right? So the thing that happened was they applied for a reappraisal, and they had a white friend pose as the homeowner when they met with the appraiser. And the appraisal came back at $493,000 higher than the original appraiser. Yeah.
This reminds me of the Greg and Emily test. I feel like we talked about this before, about when people were sending out resumes with quote unquote ethnic sounding names, that people were less likely to get a call back than if they used names like Greg and Emily, more Eurocentric sounding names.
Yeah. So even owning a home as a Black American, the chances are that they're undervaluing your home because you're Black. Yay! Homeownership is not the monolith savior of all time either.
Yo, while you're listing all these things, can I list out something myself? I found a good list.
Oh, okay, I'm ready.
I'm not gonna pull it up. This one is sillier. So I found this list of the most impressive acts of laziness in history, and one of my favorite ones was by the people who compiled the Oxford English Dictionary. It's like a big deal, you know.
That
Oxford,
is
it's like Oxford.
OED. Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Jiggy's in there. I remember the year that they put Jiggy in the OED.
That's the thing you know about the Oxford English Dictionary.
That's the thing I know.
Okay, cool. I didn't know that Jiggy was in there. Sure. When they first put together the Oxford English Dictionary, the first time before pre-Jiggy.
Pre-Jiggy, the very first edition.
It was about 200,000 words or more.
That's a lot of words.
Right? So they gave them 10 years to make it because
hell yeah.
old school times, it was, what was it? It was 1897. 1897. It was 1897. So they had a little time to put it together, 10 years to do it. After 5 years, they checked in with them and they realized they had only gotten as far as the word ant. So they said,
hey. 5 years.
Yeah, they said, y'all got
They didn't even get through all the A's.
No, not even. So they kept them working and said, keep on doing your thing, keep on doing it. Oh, excuse me. No, it's not 1897, 1879. We're all over the place. So 1879 was supposed to be done by 1889, right? 1889 came around, they were not done. 1899 came around, they were not done. Partying like that and everything. They didn't actually finish the Oxford English Dictionary until 1928.
Oh my God.
It's like basically a generation passed while they were working on it.
Yeah.
I mean, you went through the Depression. We was like almost at the point.
First World War.
The First World War happened through that. There's a lot of stuff.
A whole millennium change.
A lot of changes happened. So what happened was, as soon as they finished, they had to get back to work on the second tome right away.
Wait, they didn't get fired?
They didn't get fired. They got to spend a generation building the Oxford English Dictionary.
They didn't do it, and they didn't get fired.
Yeah. You know, here, let me show you. Let me show you another fun one. Richard Sheridan, a famous playwright, known for School for Scandal. His famous play, School for Scandal, was actually, he procrastinated a little bit on it. He waited a little too late. He actually wasn't done until opening night.
Okay.
And when I say he wasn't done until opening night, I mean that the play was going on and the actors didn't know how the play was going to end. He is furiously scribbling and handing off pages to other actors.
I would have quit.
Not only did the people stay around and he was allowed to be venerated as a writer, but School for Scandal was a hit. I mean, cats like Oscar Wilde cite him as inspiration. Hope Oscar got his stuff done.
He didn't get fired?
Nah. Personal responsibility.
You know.
Hey, while we're doing this here, let me pull up one more thing and let's play a song. I want to pull up this thing from The Root, talking about personal responsibility and inequality. I found something in the comments. Y'all know I'm a comments reading type of cat. And I thought that it was really was heartbreaking. Seeing this cat talking about, at my job now, I'm the first person in the organization's 35-year history to create a month-by-month development chart, stick to every month's deliverables and hit them. And in my department, I'm the only one of 3 who's actually hitting fundraising goals and exceeding. But we hired a white woman to take the department over. She's going to outsource my job. And meanwhile, my blonde female coworker, who's dropped over $1 million in grants because she won't do simple things like read the proposal or use too many characters in the response, is getting prepped to move up the chain and get handed a bunch more responsibility. At what point is personal responsibility supposed to kick in? Because I am succeeding downward while my coworkers are failing upwards. And this is the real thing I want to say about personal responsibility. It's an okie doke. It's a con, not the concept of personal responsibility, but the phrase meaning that you have the ability to change stuff, but you actually don't have the ability to change.
Wow.
It's put on you and you are blamed. And then when things happen out of your control, it's just, oh, well, you should have made yourself a more attractive prospect.
You should have tried harder. You should have worked harder. You should have done more.
You shouldn't have worn that skirt. You should have had protection on you.
You should have had your hair back.
You shouldn't have listened to those people. You should have known.
You should have known.
Even though don't nobody know. Let's go to a song.
Yeah,
I know it's been a lot. We're gonna go to a whole nother country. This is that last song was your last song you're gonna get today in English. So if you speak other languages, you're gonna have fun. Hopefully, if you don't speak other languages, we're gonna go to Deutschland, to Germany, for a cat named Lazy L out of München, Germany. And he's got a song called Kein Stress. That means no stress. So check that out, and we'll be back in a moment.
Yeah, ey. Gedanken sind so leicht, ich will sie weiterdenken. Lass mich nur ein bisschen Zeit verschwenden und den Fokus nicht auf Leistung lenken, sondern darauf Leichtigkeit zu spreaden. Gedanken sind so leicht, ich will sie weiterdenken. Lass mich nur ein bisschen Zeit verschwenden und den Fokus nicht auf Leistung lenken, sondern darauf Leichtigkeit zu spreaden. Yeah. Ich bewahre mir die Faszination an kleinen Dingen und nichts und niemand muss mich gerade irgendwo weiterbringen. Ich will nur Pause machen von 1000 Sachen. Lazy L, keine Faulheitsmasche, sondern gekonnte Entspanntheit zum Ausgleich. Du rufst mich an, ich geh ran und komm raus gleich. Und dann wird auf ner Wellenlänge herumgecruised. Vibes sprechen Bände, auch das Lächeln in der Fresse bricht die Grenzen, der wir denken und entfesselt unsere Träume und Vision von anderen Welten. Ja, Komm, wir starten eine fucking Freestyle-Session. Raus aus Routine, reine Isar-Nächte, yeah. Gedanken sind so leicht, ich will sie weiterdenken. Lass mich nur ein bisschen Zeit verschwenden und den Fokus nicht auf Leistung lenken, sondern darauf Leichtigkeit zu spreaden. Gedanken sind so leicht, ich will sie weiterdenken. Lass mich nur ein bisschen Zeit verschwenden und den Fokus nicht auf Leistung lenken, sondern darauf Leichtigkeit zu spreaden.
And that's Lazy L. Talking about kind stress from the Sonntag EP. Sonntag is Sunday.
Oh, lazy afternoon.
Lazy
Sunday.
Lazy Sunday. Well, like a lazy afternoon. You're thinking of the Roots song.
I love that song.
Where they just do the same verse differently every time. Lazy afternoon. But you're talking about Lazy Sunday. That's the Chronicle what of Narnia.
I feel like we just need to have more songs about people being lazy and it being okay. Let's normalize it.
Well, the whole thing, kind stress, meaning no stress. He's like, hey, I'm taking a break, I'm chilling. Even at the end, I heard him talking about this is a freestyle session. It was like, I'm just jamming and having some fun with the song.
Yeah. All right. So we are talking about personal responsibility today and the myth of personal responsibility. Can personal responsibility close the racial wealth divide? Many people, no. And so, because so many people believe that personal responsibility is the reason why the racial wealth divide exists, right?
It allows you to be okay with the way that you take advantage of stuff. There's no ethical consumption under capitalism. I wish I knew where that quote originally came from. I don't know if anyone really knows at this point, but it's really powerful because this is the thing. It sucks that the stuff that we get that's good, especially in America, comes from the backs of people who've been stepped on and killed. And a lot of times we want to just absolve ourselves of it. And be like, I don't know how to make things better. I'm not going to try to make things better. So if just I believe that other people did wrong, then it's going to be okay.
Yeah, and I'll just take care of myself and that's it, right? And the thing is too, like, the human nature, we want to feel in control of our situation, right? The idea of personal responsibility is appealing because it feels like that we can change what's going on. And when you don't believe that and when you don't have that, then what do you have for a lot of people, right? And I think that's what's so hard to really like come to terms with is there are things you can do, there are actions you can take, but you are not personally responsible for everything that's gone wrong in your life. You know, you're not personally responsible for the place that you're in. And everything that's gone wrong in
your community as well.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that's one of the things, you know, just as we say, like our community can uplift us and take us places, we also, when we don't get to the places we want to be, folks can blame their community.
Right. Well, and speaking of community, one of the big things that people believe will close the racial wealth divide is buying black or banking black, right?
That's often talked about. And hey, we talked about that, and we talk about it a lot because we do think there's an important thing. If the government is not taking care of reparations, we do need to redistribute in some kind of way, right?
Well, the government in Nixon's era, Richard Nixon,
not Norm Nixon, point guard for the Lakers.
No, Richard Dick Nixon wanted to actually invest in black capitalism. We got this from the report as well.
What?
The Duke University report. Black capitalism was a solution that would allow the government to hand over the economic problems of poverty and insufficient wealth in the black community to the community itself, effectively ridding the government of responsibility.
Now that is a tricky dick.
Yeah, right?
Well, what's funny about it is I feel like that attempt, like while it did set folks back, I think that it wasn't even able to be fully implemented because just as we talk about getting out of these things takes a lot of different factors, instituting that takes so many more factors that I think it's pretty intractable. I don't think you can break them apart.
Well, let's start with banking, right? Banking black has become a huge thing, has become, you know, there's a lot of people who are like, bank black,
it hasn't become a huge thing. It's become a thing that people say a lot.
Right, put your money in black banks, right? Well, one, it's hard to find a black-owned bank, and one of the reasons why is because there's not a lot of money in the black community to put into black banks. The thing is that banking relies on people leaving their money at the bank.
And lots of money.
Lots of money. The way that a bank makes money is they take your deposits that you leave in there and they turn around and they make loans to other customers, right? And they make their money on the difference between the interest rate they pay you and the interest rate that they charge someone else.
That's ill. So when we were talking about the segregation thing, we were saying that black banks they got cut in half between the 80s and now.
Yeah.
And there was like 60 some, and now there's around
like 20 some.
Yeah, it's very few now. So even though there are fewer banks, it's not that competition has made them consolidate. Like, there's just one fast food or a few fast food chains or a video game store and things like that. It's that these companies were cut in half because of discrimination, and also they didn't grow because they don't have enough capital to get with.
Well, there
are no whales,
right? Yeah, there are no whales.
Or they're not enough whales.
There's not enough. Well, and here's the thing. If you think about, one of the things they found was because Black families have little liquid wealth, right? We saw the numbers. If you're not a homeowner, your average net worth is $120. So people are using bank accounts at Black banks, especially because Black people bank at Black banks. Mm-hmm. They're using their checking account for day-to-day and week-to-week expenses. It's just paycheck to paycheck. So they're not leaving a huge amount of savings. They're not leaving a ton of actual capital in these banks to actually allow the banks to grow their businesses.
Which is the case for a lot of banks, but with a lot of banks, you also have the whales, right? You have the big money people that they can take it from.
Millionaires and billionaires, right? And they're the ones who are not banking at Black banks.
So like when we talk about Black banks and their ability to do anything, we would need more people who are not Black to bank there so that we could just like fill up the pool, period. Yep. And also it feels like with like your 25-ish Black banks, I wonder if we should talk to Diedrich about this, if we could get all of the Black billionaires or big multimillionaires to choose one.
Each Black billionaire choose one of the banks.
With the one bank. I would actually wonder if that would be enough or if they would need 2 or 3 billionaires to actually really be able to grow. I don't know the math on that.
Yeah. But that's what needs to happen, essentially, right? When we talk about wealth redistribution, we also are talking about in terms of like how wealth is distributed and where it sits. Mm-hmm. Because the other thing that people love saying, especially when it comes to buying Black, don't spend money outside of the Black community, right? Like there's this number that's floating out there that the Black buying power is $1.2 trillion, right?
Which is a lot of money, right?
That's a lot of money.
I can hardly fathom a billion. Fathoming a trillion is not going to happen.
Yeah, and there's a whole other thing that goes into like how that number was calculated and if it's accurate or not. But let's go with that number, right? So the estimated Black buying power is $1.2 trillion. That's only 60% of the value of JP Morgan's total assets that they have in their bank.
Wow. So JP Morgan has more than $1 trillion of assets?
JP Morgan, the bank itself, $1.2 trillion is only 60% of their total assets.
Oof.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about it on the larger scale, it's not actually as powerful as we're talking about.
$1.2 trillion is a big number, but it's not a big number.
I mean, the most recent COVID relief bill was for $1.9 trillion.
Yep.
I forget exactly how much, but it was more than $1 trillion when they did the first one around a year ago. Yeah. So they do just throw around trillions like that.
They do. Well, and think about it. It's JP Morgan. That's one bank. What about Bank of America? What about Citibank, right? What about Wells Fargo? All of these places also hold wealth. And we're not even talking about investment banks like UBS and Barclays and things like that. So,
well, and also when we talk about Black buying power, I mean, so many of these things go to necessities that like the crossover between buying from the ones that we already have and moving into some Black owned, community owned type of thing, there's like, it would take so much. We're not telling anybody out there not to start a bank, not to start a grocery store. These are wonderful things. And if you believe in them and you have an idea, go ahead with it. But there are amazingly high obstacles when you face those things.
Yeah, there really is. Well, and speaking of banks, let's talk about saving, right? Because a lot of people are like, well, Black families just need to put a greater emphasis on saving, right? You just need to save more. You need to stop spending frivolously, stop buying those sneakers and those big screen TVs and blah, 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 and whatever it is. But let's look at the numbers, right? Because when you control for income, Black families actually have a slightly higher savings rate than white families. And they found that when you compare spending to income, white families actually spend 1.3 times more as consumers than Black families do.
Whoa. We gotta lead with this. So when we talk about personal responsibility and the racial wealth divide, white folks are spending a third more?
Yep, they're spending a third more and they're saving less than Black families dollar for dollar.
So they're spending more, they're saving less. I know, I don't know how this breaks down along racial lines, but I know that people with high net worth contribute way less to charitable things.
Yeah, compared to the dollars,
Yeah, compared to the dollars.
Compared to the dollars they make, like especially when you look at like when billionaires donate like $100 million or $10 million or whatever it is, that's a drop in the bucket. That's like you putting $20 in the collection plate compared to how much money they have. And that's the thing is when you compare it to actual percentages, Black families save more and spend less, period. That's what happens, right? And so savings is not the answer because they're doing it already.
Yeah.
So what about the lack of financial literacy?
Folks are already saving. I mean,
they're already saving.
I just want, let's take a moment to feel heartened about people's, because, that means that people aren't as lazy, stupid, or bad at this as people would like them to believe.
No.
We're
not.
When you talk about doing the math, can I make a little one that I often talk about with my students whenever I'm talking to teachers? I've gone into places where I've had teachers tell me that the thing they need to teach their kids is not to be like their parents buying the big screen TVs and buying the Nike shoes.
That's why they're in there. Okay, go ahead.
Check this out. So doing really generous math, buying your average big screen TV is going to cost you roughly a G.
Yeah.
About $1,000.
Okay, yeah.
And your Nike shoes being real all over the place, let's say $200 for this. Yeah. $1,200 we're talking about. If you are a family who's making $20,000, you really can't save much. You really can't do a lot, and there's not a lot of economic mobility. But people are like, hey, you shouldn't be buying those big screen TVs and those fancy shoes.
Stop doing that.
I hear that, right? That's got to be tough with your tight budget. So when you break it down, a TV is going to last you at least 5 years.
Definitely.
And your shoes are going to last you at least a couple of years. So let's average it. Let's say 3 years, right? Yeah. $1,200 over 3 years. That is $400 a year. That's less than 5% of what you're making. What is the math?
Hold on.
It's actually 2%. I got it. It's 2%.
2%. That's 2% of your income if you're making $20,000.
It's not the thing that is making those families not able to take care of their families.
Yeah.
It's the fact that they made $20,000 that year.
Yeah. Imagine trying to live on that if you don't already. Like, really.
That's not a down payment on a lot of homes.
For real. How are you going to save that much money if that's what you make?
That's not enough to give your family the ability to go on vacation. That's not enough for you to move from one place to another place where there's a better job.
Or closer to your job.
That big screen TV that costs you $400 a year, I mean, hey, you can't afford a trip. So that's the vacation that your kids get.
Yeah.
They get to stay at home and watch some TV. Not even get a new TV. They get to stay home and watch some TV.
Wow, yeah.
Those things that you're talking about are like these amazing luxuries. Those are things that are giving kids the ability to feel like there is a tomorrow.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, sometimes I feel like there's not.
Damn.
What else you got for us?
I mean, the last thing I have is lack of financial literacy is what people love to say, right? Well, if people just knew better, if they understood the financial system more, then they wouldn't make these mistakes. And the big thing people point to is, well, really like low-income people shouldn't do predatory lending. They should, don't they know better? Don't they know how much interest they charge? There's such a focus on like, they charge so much interest, right? Payday loans, payday advances, all of these things. Like, you shouldn't go there. You should know better than to go there. Look how much interest they're charging. Anytime someone asks us to teach a workshop to adults, they always want us to talk about predatory lending, and they always want us to tell people not to do it. It's like, well, duh. I wouldn't do it unless I had to.
Yeah, and that's the thing. But hey, I mean, I remember when I was 19 or 20 and I was subletting from somebody. I came home and my place was boarded up because the person I was paying money to didn't finish paying to them. And I got extra jobs. I took overtime at where I was. I was begging and borrowing from all my peoples. And in the end, it still wasn't enough. And if I was going to have a place to sleep, I took a payday loan. And it took me 4 years to pay it off. And it was terrible. And I knew better. And I had to do it anyway. When people talk about rappers, and then whenever people meet me and they're like, oh, finance or rap and stuff like that, it's like, oh, too bad those rappers in the 90s took those bad deals because they didn't know better. Sometimes they didn't know better, but a lot of times they knew. They went there and they read it, but what were you going to do? Nobody else. Who else was giving you $1 million advance?
Yeah. It was your only option. That's usually what happens. Financial literacy is not the answer. Financial literacy says, oh, well, don't you understand compound interest? If you only understood compound interest, then you could invest. right? If you only understood XYZ, then you would make different decisions. And the reality is that the situation that we put people in don't allow them to make different decisions. It's not about personal responsibility. It's about needing to change the system. It's about needing to really make policy that pushes these things forward. So we do have wealth redistribution. So we do have reparations. So we do actually put people on a level playing field.
And since we're the personal finance folks and not the policy folks,
Mm-hmm.
what do we do?
That's a good question. What do we do, right? Because that's why personal responsibility is so appealing. And the thing is that we do encourage you to build up your savings. We encourage you to have a good credit score. We encourage you to do your taxes. We encourage you to do all these things because we want you to think of personal finance as a revolutionary act. When you have that foundation, when you're able to take care of yourself, when you're able to have made some sacrifices and put your community and put your family in a different position, then we're able to have power to change policy.
Yeah, I know some of that may seem contradictory. It's not really that you're able to make some sacrifices. What it is, because even personal responsibility gets into what we are saying to you. When you're able to make it so that you are more comfortable than you were yesterday, you have more energy and more time to deal with these larger things.
You do.
That are taking care of the entire system. And when you can do that, you can actually start fighting for something that's going to make change. Until then, you are just like this last song we've got from Maya Portugal, from an artist named Lazy, with Pirata Sem Tesoro. You are a pirate without treasure.
Ooh.
Fighting, hacking, doing all the tricks, going over the high seas, all to open up an empty box. And we'll check y'all next time. Thank you for listening. If you go on to iTunes or any of these places, iTunes don't even exist no more. If you go there with Apple Podcasts or any other places, YouTube, we're on Spondulix, which is a wonderful financial literacy and resilience-based streaming network. Hate us, rate us, debate us, any kind of thing you want. But check out Lazy here from Portugal, and we'll check you next time. This is the Brunch and Budget Podcast.
Vejo caras menos simpáticas com dedos apontados, mas mentes captas não captam os meus recados. Simplicidade na escrita, cumplicidade na vida. Estou disposto a fazer tudo para vivê-la de forma pacífica. A fórmula perfeita é relativa, por vezes meias amor e o que colhes é intriga. A receita eleita ainda não foi descoberta. Quanto mais tu descontes, mais eu te vejo a careca. Checa, nem tudo o que brilha é ouro, não te iludas. Quantas vezes já gritaste, mas pessoas parecem surdas. Contornaste alguns buracos, mas espetaste nas curvas. E tudo isto acontece porque acreditas em juras de qualquer tipo de ajudas, mas dão-te umicas escuras. E a ferida lastra, não há linha para estas suturas. Toma cautela com a bela adormecida, só se finge de morta porque não lhe cheira a guita. Nem tudo o que brilha é ouro, eu sei. Nem tudo o que brilha é ouro, eu sei, sei. Nem tudo o que brilha é ouro, eu sei. Nem tudo o que brilha é ouro. Nem tudo o que brilha é ouro, eu sei. Sou pirata sem tesouro e sei que tu és também. A riqueza que tivemos nunca foram diamantes, mas brilhamos no escuro agora bem mais do que antes. Nem tudo o que brilha é ouro, eu sei. Sou pirata sem tesouro e sei que tu és também. A riqueza que tivemos nunca foram diamantes, mas brilhamos no escuro agora bem mais do que antes. Rico por dentro, busco reconhecimento, com pitada de timidez e arrependimento. Ao mesmo tempo descarado, por outro lado contigo, e para me ver chateado apenas fores meu amigo. Não ligo a frases feitas por cotovelos com gretas, tipo cuscas em igrejas, beatas e outras tretas. Topas é desperdício, prefiro agarrar-me ao vício. Horas e horas a fio, sonhando com um ofício de jeito. Trago no peito um desejo, mas não vejo gênio. Só quando me olho ao espelho é que eu enxergo. Mas confio por vezes, o valor que eu tenho não tem a ver com vocês, só tem a ver com o meu empenho. Se caio, tento outra vez, é assim de onde eu venho. Uma casa com sensatez, em que o amor vem primeiro, só depois vem o dinheiro. Foi assim que aprendi, sou um gajo verdadeiro e isso digo-te aqui. Nem tudo o que brilha é ouro, eu sei. Nem tudo o que brilha é ouro, eu sei, sei. Nem tudo o que brilha é ouro, eu sei. Nem tudo o que brilha é ouro. Nem tudo o que brilha é ouro, eu sei. Sou pirata sem tesouro e sei que tu és também. A riqueza que tivemos nunca foram diamantes, mas brilhamos no escuro agora bem mais do que antes. Nem tudo o que brilha é ouro, eu sei. Sou pirata sem tesouro e sei que tu és também. A riqueza que tivemos nunca foram diamantes, mas brilhamos no escuro agora bem mais do que antes. Nem tudo o que brilha é ouro, eu sei. Sou pirata sem tesouro e sei que tu és também. A riqueza que tivemos nunca foram diamantes, mas brilhamos no escuro agora bem mais do que antes. Nem tudo o que brilha é ouro, eu sei. Sou pirata sem tesouro e sei que tu és também. A riqueza que tivemos nunca foram diamantes, mas brilhamos no escuro agora bem mais do que antes.